In this episode of the WRST Podcast, we speak with Cindy Lowe, CEO and Chief Event Strategist at Red Velvet. We dive into topics on how to create meaningful connections in this post-pandemic world, how being stubborn helps with being a successful entrepreneur, and how to balance a career with motherhood. Lots of good stuff. Let's dive in. Hey guys, good morning. This is the WRST Podcast. I'm your host today, Deanna WRST, and I'm here with Cindy Lowe. Hi, Cindy. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Cindy's the CEO and Chief Event Strategist of Red Velvet, a professional speaker, a published author, a wife, and a mother of two, all the things. Cindy, thanks again for being here. If you were to pretend that we just met, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, definitely as a mother first, because oftentimes that does kind of shadow everything else. But I would like to also say a serial entrepreneur. I'm very curious how things work. I definitely been fallen into good graces where I can invest in certain things. And so I like to explore and just be curious about how things, work and make money. So those would probably be the two. And I'm definitely a devoted wife, but my husband might joke that I work a little bit too much. But we've been now married 17 and a half years. He knows the drill.
Yeah, I bet. Well, when you love what you do.
Yes, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks for that intro. Curious explorer.
Yeah.
I love that. I see you went to school here at UT Austin.
I did.
And you were able to land at the iconic Trilogy software.
Yeah,
which is
a little different than what
amazing.
I do now. Exactly.
So start us off from the beginning.
Yeah.
Were there any mentors or early lessons that you learned that helped set you on this path?
Yeah. Well, I like to tell people first, explain kind of my career path because it is very non-traditional. So if you know McCombs Business School, we were definitely trained at least when I was going to school from 94 to 98, we were definitely trained to work at big corporation, big box companies and work up the ladder. And I don't know what it was about me, but again, maybe that curious explorer side, I decided I would go to Trilogy Software, which at that time, no one knew who they were. And even now, no, because they've pivoted since during the big heydays. And I went about that because part of me was curious of how the software company was operating. And also I got to wear jeans to work and it was just a very different atmosphere. But similar to how everything kind of changed post-pandemic or during the pandemic, they called the Great Resignation, people switching jobs. The same thing happened to me while I was at Trilogy. So 9/11 happened. And I had a lot of time to process what I was doing. And it wasn't that I wasn't unhappy with my work. It was just that I wasn't excited. And you said earlier, when you love what you do, you just don't feel like it's work. And I would get up. I loved my job in the sense of I loved the challenge. I loved getting paid well. I loved traveling. But it wasn't bounce out of bed and hey, what challenge is going to be on my, in my inbox today? And so I asked a lot of my friends of what do you see me doing if I could do anything in the world? What do you see me doing? And a lot of my friends pointed me to events, which is very unusual because, to be honest, I didn't really think you could make money off of events. I thought events was you either own a hotel and that's how you make money, or you volunteer and you do it for free. I didn't realize that there was this middle ground, which is what we do, run an agency and make money from helping companies and brands activate. So I learned a whole lot and I had to kind of jump into that path and teach myself. So that's kind of the short of how I pivoted from, again, I was not traditionally trained in this space. I pivoted at a time where I was also exploring of what do I want to do with my career and my life. But I have no regrets.
That's incredible. So you took the advice of your friends
to
pivot from a cushy tech job.
Yes. So just to explain how cushy it was, and I probably shouldn't even use that word cushy on podcasts, but I was very naive. Again, 25, owned my first home, a really nice home. My parents were like, you're not supposed to buy a home at 25, and especially in the Austin market. Yeah. And again, I just didn't realize how fortunate we were and also be able to have savings. So that is honestly why when I left, I realized now looking back that there was just a lot of things that were aligned. So I wasn't I told someone last week, I didn't realize how badly it could have failed because again, in my mind, like the failure couldn't be that bad. Like I just like, let me just do it. And what do I have to lose?
Right. Worst case scenario, you go back to your tech job.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly. So I didn't feel like I was putting too much at risk. And mind you, I was not married at the time and I did not have kids. Yeah. So my only responsibility was my house and my dog.
That's amazing. So you took a big leap and decided to pivot to start your own business.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. So tell us a little bit more about what Red Velvet does.
Yeah. So we are a full service experiential agency. And what that means is, so when you hear agency, you normally think of PR, marketing agencies, and those are all the traditional types of agencies, the ones that help you get ads on TV, maybe help you sell crypto online, and that is fine. But there is a whole new side of marketing that came out, over the last decade or so, which is called brand immersive marketing. It's like when you can go into a space and you can already feel the brand before I even have to sell it to you. So for example, let's talk about the iconic Apple brand. Even without seeing the logo, if you walk into an Apple store, you already know how it feels, right? Mm-hmm. And that is what we're essentially doing for brands, but on an event level. So if you were a vodka brand or a tequila brand or a consumer good brand, we would be creating that experiential space so that just by walking in, smelling, or even receiving an email, the way I wrote the content should evoke the brand without me even saying the brand's name. That's when I know we've been successful. So that's essentially what we do. And we are the ideators, the creators, the logistics, the magic, making it all happen. And of course, post-event, strategy and reviewing and everything. So
full service.
Yes, full service.
End to end.
Yep.
Make your brand come to life in a new event space.
Yeah. And beyond Austin. So we were originally very focused on Austin because we grew up with South by. So having South by Southwest in our backyard, kind of going back to luck a little bit, I didn't realize how lucky I was to be, given these opportunities. And then we kind of got our reputation, and then we started traveling. So now we go around the world for brands and clients.
Amazing.
Yeah.
A little bit of luck, a little bit of jumping on the opportunity, right?
Yeah. And definitely, I will not lie. It is a lot of hard work because some people don't realize how much sweat equity goes into doing events. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that part because I always tell people, you do need to get your hands dirty. If you are too afraid to get your hands dirty and you're just the ideator, you probably wouldn't do well at Red Velvet because we tend to need to experiment with certain things. And that means if someone doesn't show up and doesn't do what they were hired to do, you jump in and you take care of it.
Right. Everyone's got ideas.
Yes.
It's execution that really matters. Gosh, and you've been doing it for 20 years.
I know. I feel old when people say that now.
It's great. It's a bragging point. Wisdom, right? So Red Velvet's current tagline, reimagining what it means to bring people together.
Yeah.
Feels so relevant in this post-pandemic world. But what does that mean to you?
To me, that is to ask, what are we trying to do? Because again, everyone wants to get their product in front of someone. Everyone wants to talk about their brand. Everyone wants to be on the front page of whether it's a Fortune magazine or Forbes. But really, let's take a step back and go, what does it mean? Because we are all humans. And I think the one thing we realized during the pandemic is even the most introverted person needed some human connection. So that human connection can come in the face of a digital piece. It can come in the face of a physical meeting like this. It can come, of course, in a physical setting of like an event. But we want to make sure we're asking ourselves the relevancy of everything and not just throwing a party. Because I think that's the part that hurts us the most in our industry is when someone comes in and go, well, can't you just take care of the catering? Can't you just take care of slap my logo here? But I go, but that is not the point of that. The thing is to be transformative and really make the engagement and the connection meaningful. And the best part, honestly, is when people can connect on a whole new level. Because I know for me, it is finding like-minded people and putting them in the room together so they can have meaningful conversation. So they didn't feel like it was just being sold to. It was actually, you feel like you have someone, a new friend that you can lean on.
I love that. Forming meaningful connections. Yeah. Actual, real, more than surface level.
Correct. Because again, you've been to those events where you feel like, yes, that you're just being sold to, and it's not. We value our time so much more now post pandemic, And to me, that's why I think it's even more important to reevaluate how we're designing these.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. It's hard to form those connections. I feel like it's even harder now post-pandemic
you think so?
to really connect with folks. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe we're still getting back into it. Folks are a little bit uptight, you know.
There are definitely some people
time alone.
There's definitely a little bit of a wall, but I have to say, maybe it's just me. I feel like it's easier to talk about. Now, one thing I don't like going down is I don't like going down that path of the negative, like how sad and depressed we all were during that time. Because that is a very easy rabbit hole to go down. And I try to quickly, when I realize, oh no, the person's going down that rabbit hole, we got to switch gears. So, but that's interesting to hear that maybe you've given me something to think about because I've honestly thought, man, we've moved past this. Now can we get back into the norm of just going about meeting people and getting to know who they really are as a person.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely past it, right? I went to the doctor's yesterday actually, and I said, can I put this pen back with the other pens?
Yeah.
She said, just put it back.
Great example.
Oh, okay. I've touched it though, but no, it's okay.
That is a great example.
So not going down the rabbit hole of the way things were. But I feel like things are still different than they were post-pandemic. You obviously see a lot of events. What's the state of events in your view? What's the same, but what's different?
No, there's definitely a lot of difference. So one, events are definitely back, but here's the interesting part. So someone shared actually this statistics with me. So in our own industry, our hospitality/events industry, they said 58% of the people doing the events are all new. So because what I had shared with them is I said, right now we are firsthand seeing every executive team, every brand we're working with, their entire team is new. So we actually have some of the old information from pre-pandemic of what their brand stood for, what their goals were. Now, of course, we obviously have to ask them, what is your current fiscal 2023, 2024 plans? Because everything that was 2019, 2020 is way past. I mean, but here's the interesting part is, again, because everyone is so new and so fresh in their roles, that has caused a shift in how events are handled. Because now all of a sudden we might be dealing with someone that may be not pro events. Maybe they were just told by their C-level executive or their board or their investors, you need to improve the numbers. So then naturally they go, okay, so how do we do that? Well, traditionally we did these number of webinars, these number of customer conferences. This is what we did. But then when we sit down with them, I go, so how are we going to measure this success? I'm looking at like deer in headlights and they don't even know where to begin. So that's what I'm finding is that almost like we are operating at a very fast pace because they are being tasked with some pretty big, daunting goals. But at the same time, they don't even know what to expect out of the event. So I have to take time to educate them. So it's like we are almost having to squeeze all of that education in a much shorter time frame just to get them back to the point where we were in 2020. Early 2020, 2019, you know what I mean? So that's changed. And I'm going to be honest, I don't like how events have just come back and they just basically try to go back to the old way of doing things, because that is so not the way to do things. Again, people, yes, want to be heard. We do want to have a good educational panel topics and whatnot, but don't just throw people up there on the stage without prepping them, without finding out what they're doing right now and really setting them up for success. And people want to be connected. So as we talked about earlier, if I'm going to go to this big event, I want to know that there's someone else that's going to be like-minded like me. So they do want what they're calling these intentional like meetups, and there's a company called Brain Dates where they will match them if you and I have similarities in common of business goals. So taking the time to really meet, because again, there are these thousands and thousands of persons trade show conferences, and that's great and all for sales and marketing. But if you don't make at least one or two solid connections, you're going to walk away not feeling like your time was valued. So that's what's different right now. People are going to judge pretty quickly whether or not they want to come back year after year.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
that totally resonates with me, because if I host a 2-day event and I make one real connection, it was a win.
Correct.
Whereas post-pandemic, I might have been more on the like, I've got to meet 20 new people that I can sort of superficially.
You mean pre-pandemic? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then connect with on LinkedIn. Yeah, no, it's not the same anymore. Exactly. Right. And the other big thing that I've been hearing a lot more people going back to is, when I meet that person, do I feel like they have my back as well? Because there's been so much turnover right now, the trust of having each other's back is so key. And if they don't feel like that person, the partnership is really there, it tends to wane, and so they're on the hunt for that true partner. So something to think about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Finding a true partner, probably both in who you're working with,
team,
right, on the
and external.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, a lot of good stuff to think about there. Everyone's out to make meaningful connections.
Yep.
And even thinking about preparing speakers to have connections and someone like-minded. I love the idea of a brain date.
Yeah.
That sounds lovely.
Well, it is the name. I'm not sponsored by them, but it is the name of the company. And I actually, when I got to experience it a couple years ago, and I go, oh, this is smart, because you're trying to, again, take my profile, and it's like literally like a date, and you're trying to match me up, because what am I looking for and what are they looking for? And we spend, I think, 15 minutes together, like on a speed date, and get to know each other. And then if we agree that it's worth time, then we schedule a follow-up meeting afterwards. And to me, that's to me making sense of trying to really match up people that want to be connected.
I love that.
Yeah.
Speed dating.
Yeah.
Bringing it back.
But in the corporate world.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Oh man. So I'm wondering, over these 20 years.
Yeah.
A lot has happened in the last 20 years.
Yes.
You've weathered a lot of storms. Right?
Yeah.
I'm even 2008.
2011 even, a little briefly. Yep.
The whole thing. What do you think has contributed to your ongoing success? Certain qualities, values?
So one is, I am definitely a glass half full person. So even in the darkest of times during the pandemic, and I have not lied in saying that the last 3 years were probably the hardest of my professional career out of the 20 years of doing Red Velvet. And but funny enough, we just wrote a blog post last week that was called How Does Stubborn Play into Experiential Marketing? And part of it is because I think my persistency of seeing things through, that's what kind of has led us out of the dark. But the other big one is, you do also have to know that your team is capable. And so I know people talk about teams a lot and about company culture a lot, but do they really live it? And I've been spending so much time of trying to figure that out. Like, okay, is each of our team member really bought in, and are they really living out what we are setting out there to do? And when we're all on the same page and moving towards that same goal, that has lifted us out of the darkest times, because you need everyone on the team going towards that same goal. And so I think between my stubbornness, persistency, I like to call it, and having the right team members and identifying who is on the team to doing that has actually led us through the darkest of times. And to be honest, we did not suffer as madly in 2008, but definitely the pandemic was the hardest on us.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the stubborn topic.
Yeah, please.
That's a really, really good one. But you've struck a chord with me here
about
a team being capable.
Yeah.
Capable is one thing.
Yeah.
The other part is being on the same page and really bought in to do the hard work.
Correct.
Tell me more about that. How do you encourage that?
So I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've been perfect in this way. I tell people a lot of times when they interview with us, I go, to be honest, I'm a very good visionary and I'm a very good executor, but I'm not actually a good manager. And let me explain why. My head is so far ahead of where I see Red Velvet, where I see what we want to do, that I do rely heavily on our leadership team to help me manage the team. So a lot of times I will ask them questions. I go, hey, help me understand, is so-and-so on the same page with us? Because I see them struggling here. And I'm trying to understand, is it a gap between me communicating what our vision is, or is it a gap between them understanding like what I'm talking about and how it affects their role? So there's just so much of me asking questions and the going back and forth, but recognizing again what you're good at first is, because I know I am not an effective manager because I am so far ahead in the vision that sometimes people really want to be handheld, and I am not that kind of manager, you know? Mm-hmm. And so back to your question is that during the interview process, we try so hard to find the people that understand how agile and how startup-y our culture is. So even though we're 20 years old, I have to say our culture is very startup. And what I mean by that is if there's a new idea, for example, when crypto, so fun fact, we actually did our first crypto conference before crypto was a thing. Blockchain came to us, gosh, and it was a thing I had to Google because I didn't even know what it was. I had heard about it very lightly. They were coming to Austin. They were doing it in a very small venue. And they said, hey, we're doing this blockchain conference. Would you be willing to help us? And I was like, what's a blockchain conference? And I had to look up all the things and learn all the things beforehand. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting. Is this the new way of paying? And I just had a lot of questions. And so my point to that is going back to, again, the company culture is, if I was a traditional company, we would have said no because you didn't fit one of our boxes, our traditional boxes of who we were targeting. But because I was very curious of how it operated, I go, yes, we'll take it on. Now, they did ask if they could pay us in crypto. And at that time, I was like foolish. And I said no, but I should have. What I should have done is split half and half.
Yeah.
Because then I could have made money off that, and I could have also paid our employees. But at the time, again, I was foolish. See what I mean? I make mistakes too. But again, my point is that a lot of times when I pivot us, I look and see the reaction from the team, and I see how they're responding, and that usually tells me are they curious enough to understand why we're going after this business, or are they kind of frozen like deer in headlights and going, this is not our typical business. I'm just going to do the event as is and then just shut the door behind it, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's the part where we're always trying to finesse it and figure out how do we find those right people, because we are very much a startup, agile company, even though we are 20 years established and have a strong reputation of executing. And it's tricky because events are already stressful. And then on top of that, I'm trying to look for another layer of this, what I will call, you either have it or you don't, sadly. And that's the part where it's not as easy to just find out during the interview process. It's almost like you have to be with them side by side in the trenches to find out if they have it. I've been trying to get better at asking the right questions during the interview process, but we've been fooled before. So it's not an easy answer. But don't give up. Like I said, I'm a glass half full person. And I'm confident because I've seen it when we have the right team members and they are on the same page and they really do believe in the mission. It's magic. It really is. I mean, the best years of Red Velvet, it's because the team was symbiotic.
Very inspirational.
Yeah.
So you've got to be curious is what I heard, but also agile.
Yes.
And running your business like a startup, in my experience, is the way to be. You can't keep doing the same thing and expect a new result.
Thank you. And also, things are going to change. I mean, constantly. Like, you know right now, the big topic is AI, and everyone's talking about it, and they're like, should we not use it? And I'm like, no, we got to lean into it. Now, I'm not saying this is what we're going to do to create our events, but we need to figure out how are we going to use it to make us smarter, faster, and more efficient so that we can give our clients something better and even maybe, again, win a piece of business faster. So yeah, no, to me, it is about using what you have at your fingertips and figuring out how to best use it. But see, I got a lot of resistance in my team. See, that's the part. Is like, and I get it, and I do want them to challenge me because that you never want someone to be just yes, yes, yes. You want it to be a healthy challenge, so that we can have that healthy debate. You know.
And in some ways, if they're not challenging you, right?
Then they're not. Then that means I do think they're lost.
Right? Then they're not actually curious.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to ask questions in order to express curiosity.
Yeah.
Versus just...
Usually when I see someone not asking any questions, I do think they are a lost. And that's when I go back to the manager and ask, I go, was I going too fast? Because as you can see, I talk really fast. I go, or was I just too far off the rails? But yeah.
And it sounds like you've created a culture where your team is willing to give you that feedback. They'll tell you.
I want to hear it because a lot of times they get me thinking and go, ooh, that's a good one. I was like, let me think about that because you're right. I go, let me think about that aspect of it. But I was like, but the thing is, I do act fast in the sense that like I will take it and I sleep on it. And maybe the next day or two, I'll have it. I'll make a decision on how I want to take that piece of information. And I don't know, again, if that was for my trilogy days, because we were always coming up with new ideas, new revenue traction, and so that might have just stuck with me maybe. And I have just been that way ever since.
I think that's such an important topic. And in some ways, it's something we have to train, right? Because folks who are new to the workforce, they don't know any better.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
You learn a lot of theory in college or in early jobs.
Yeah.
But if you don't work with a committed, hard-driving, entrepreneurial-minded leader, you just don't get that.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mentor at UT, and I tell them, I go, when you go take your first job or first internship, you should find out quickly or assess at least what kind of manager you have, because you need to be smart about it, because not all managers are created equal. And to your point is, do you have a manager that is only going to follow the rules? Like, meaning like, this is what I've been told and I'm only going to do it this way. Or these are my guardrails and this is where we're going to play in, Or the latter one, which is the most extreme, which is, hey, this is all the stuff and how do we go about this and how do we tackle it? And I should mention, even though as much as I say all these big dream, again, the goal too is you have to be a doer though. Because again, you can be an ideator all day you want, but if you don't execute, your reputation will not match up, if that makes sense.
100%.
And so to me, that is still key. So I am looking at all of it. Someone did say, they go, then are you looking for unicorns? And I go, I was like, I don't want to call it a unicorn because I have seen this happen before. And so to me, they're not unicorns. It's just that it's just that there's so many people out there and I've got to find the right ones that are the right fit.
Right. And they may seem like unicorns because they're somewhere else doing really hard work, growing someone else's business or their own.
Correct. You got it. Exactly. So to me, I was like, no, I don't think, because unicorn means it's so rare that it's like, it's non-existent. And I was like, no, this is not a unicorn. This is just because they're somewhere else. They're not on our team.
Right. You just got to work hard.
Yes.
It's hard, of course, but we've all got the same number of hours in the day.
Exactly.
Right. But I found also those types of people, doers, require a lot of stimulation. I myself am a doer, and I am constantly thinking of the future. I live in the future all the time, which is why I love focusing on Web3 now.
Yep,
right?
I love it.
Latest and greatest thing. And in events, I'm sure it's the same for you. You've got to always be looking to the future. And there's so much going on, right? You mentioned AI and, of course, Web3.
Yep.
And over your 20 years was also the dawn of social media and mobile apps and the whole thing,
Because when I started Red Velvet, there was no such thing as social media, or at least Facebook only existed if you were in college. And since I was not in college, I didn't have Facebook for a while. Yeah.
Right,
And I've told people it's so different now because I started the business with $8,000 cash. And to be honest, I think $8,000 would get you so much further today because you've got social media. You can create a website on your own. You don't have to hire a webmaster. There's so many tools that are more DIY that to me, it's easier today to start a service-based business like ours. And as long as you are, again, focused and know what you want to achieve, you can grow it and scale it faster, in my opinion.
I love that. There's the headline right there. With $8,000, you should be able to create a 100%. Services business.
100%. Again, because services is different. Because remember, services is people.
Right.
So then, if you are the person, you can start it, and then you can scale it from there. It's so different from products, and also all the big or even SaaS, because you've got a huge overhead. You've got developers. You've got There's so many things that you've got to think about.
Yeah, 100%. So on that, with all of the new tech advancements that have happened over the past 20 years and trying to keep your team engaged and curious and all of that, how do you personally stay hip on the latest and greatest and make sure that you remain relevant with the brands you represent?
So one is definitely anytime when someone brings something new to me, I do like to Google it and kind of go down a rabbit hole, I call it, and figure out what it is. Because again, that goes back to my curiosity nature. Second is I do use social media to kind of learn what's going on. And also I have kids. I have 2 teenagers now, 17 and 14. And I pay attention to what they're doing. And you know, AR was talked about a long time, like prior to even us getting the whole headset at home. And once I saw though how my son was applying it, I go, okay, guys, we really need to figure out how we can make this more affordable for the bigger events. Because we were selling the concept pre-pandemic, but it was still very expensive. So it was out of reach for a lot of companies. Only certain companies could afford it. But I think the price point has come down a lot and it's more accessible. So I think now we got to figure out how do we lean into that. And how do we, again, make it, whether it's Web3, whether it's AR, like we need to figure out how that looks and how to sell it, because people need to be told what that looks and feels like. Because until they've experienced it, until it becomes second nature, they're not going to know what that means. And the best example, honestly, during the pandemic was when, was it Justin Bieber? He had a concert. No, it was another young celebrity. They had a concert in one of the games, the online gaming. And that was probably the best example to help me get people to realize that you could do everything in the digital world. And but that's how I try to stay on top of it, is definitely reading. Well, I admit I don't read books. I read magazines, I read blogs, I read a lot of things online, and just try to stay on top of it that way. And of course, I open the team for feedback too.
Right. So you're getting hip on what's going on. You're hearing from the kids, which is a great mechanism. Yeah. I'm right there with you. My 13-year-old brings me new words.
Yes.
Right. The new trends. It's really, really helpful. And of course your team is learning on their own as well, doing their own research. But when you come to the team and you've got this new idea and they're looking at you like deer in headlights, right? What is it that you're talking about? How do you sell that? How do you get folks on board to do
that? Is a great question. And I'm going to be honest, I'm perfecting this because there's a lot of times where they're like, Cindy, this is we don't have time. We're not ready. And I guess usually first is I usually will Slack it out. I will Slack it out on our education channel or random, depending on what it is, because I'll be like, hey, I saw this and this fascinated me. Take the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just read the article. And that's usually my first hint to them of like, this is really intriguing to me. Second one is if I go down that rabbit hole myself and I find more, I will probably either bring it up in a team meeting or try to bring it up as an example. Like maybe we're in the middle of a pitch for a client and go, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we pitch this idea to this client? And then probably the last is if I'm really, really hell bent on like, hey, this is something we have to do and we have to adopt it, I will probably make it a part of something bigger, like whether it's our all hands meeting or something to where we have to immerse ourselves in it, you know? And that takes time. I admit, I even share this in my book that I wrote, because at that time it was Slack. This is the funny part. I was just because I was like, there has to be a better way for us to communicate than email. And I had installed Slack. This was, again, before Slack was definitely before it got bought by Salesforce. I mean, it was way early in the days. Like, it was still very new, and the team hated it. And I shared this in my book. And that team at the time was like, I don't know why we're using this thing. Stop changing our process. And I was like, no, because I think it's the way that we're going to work and communicate. And again, I know there are other Slack competitors like Teams and Atlassian and whatnot, but Slack was what I thought was going to be for us. So I did actually remove it because based on feedback, they were just like, no. They were adamant, no. But then I did some more research and I realized I didn't set it up correctly. So I admitted, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't set up our Slack the way our process works correctly so that people would lean into using it. So then a few years, or maybe a year or two later, I think it was, we reintroduced it to the team. And we reestablished new processes of how we would use the channels, et cetera. And of course, now I can't even imagine living without it, you know? So that's the part, is also look at yourself too, because I admit, I think I used it wrong the first time. So I couldn't sell it to them. It was too disruptive of our process.
What a great example. I love Slack. I've introduced Slack to a number of organizations, received resistance, and WRST is one of them.
Oh, no. Guys, I'm telling you, unless you have another, again, there are other platforms, I know, but to me, Slack is by far the easiest to implement and follow and get, and learn.
It's the little things too, the organization,
yes,
and the replying in a thread message.
Oh my gosh, important. You and I are the same. Yes. I love the pin, the pin to channel. Yep.
Totally. Yep. The ability to search. It's all in one place.
And I should mention, I am not saying this because they're a client of ours through Sparks Agency, but that's not, we were using it long before they became a client of ours. So I was like, no, I am that much of a big fan of it.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I could talk about Slack for
That's awesome.
But that's great. So you admitted that you didn't do it as optimally as you could have in the rollout.
Oh, I was completely wrong the way I first introduced it, and I was like, oh my gosh, now I see why it was so. And you do need to look at that and evaluate it, and it was received with resistance. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great lesson right there.
Yeah.
You admitted that you were wrong, and your whole team didn't leave or revolt.
Well, we did have almost a new team by that time, sadly. So, but yeah.
We're still making it.
But we're still making it work. Yeah.
Right.
It's all good.
So I want to come back to this idea of being stubborn.
Yeah.
I understand that Red Velvet is a certified women-owned business.
We are. Yeah. Through a hub, WBENC, and even now the minority one too. So yeah. So now we have all three.
That's fantastic.
What's sad is, obviously I've owned it all 20 years, but what's sad is it took me almost like 10, 15 years to actually make that happen. It's just because I never had the time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to make this happen.
Too busy doing the work.
Yes. But now we are officially certified on all three.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Recently, you mentioned your blog post.
Yeah.
And I know you spoke at the Round Rock Chamber about this idea of being stubborn and encouraging women to live in an abundance mindset.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So, one, as I said, glass is half full. You're going to get a lot of no's in life. I'm going to be honest. I got a lot of no's. Heck, part of the reason why I started Red Velvet was because I got 3 no's. So I technically wanted to work for someone. I did not, if you had asked me back at UT days, back in college, if I was going to own my own business, I would have told you hell no. And here's why. Because I worked for my dad who owned his own business. And since my dad, English was his second language, I was his marketing person, his sales person, because I did all the things. It's not that he couldn't speak English, it's that I was more efficient and I knew how to use the tools and I knew how much work it would be to do all those things. And so I was like, why would I do that when I came from tech. I was getting a paycheck, a very nice paycheck. And so I had no desire. There was nothing I needed to prove to owning my own business. But what I didn't understand post 9/11 was that events were hurt just as badly as it was during the pandemic in 2020, and no one was hiring. So I got 3 rejections from people that they didn't want to touch me because I didn't have any formal experience. They were like, you come from tech, you don't know events, you don't know marketing, you don't know any of this stuff. Sorry, thank you, but no thanks. And so I decided, okay, I am going to go and lean into this because the feedback out of 2 of those 3 was like, you don't have any experience. And I said, so if I create the experience, you'll hire me. Needless to say, I've now been doing this 20 years. I never went back to them. But that's what I mean by leaning in and don't take no for an answer and kind of being a little stubborn about it, because what I did know about myself at that time is I did love events. I loved the DNA of the makeup of events, the who, what, when, where, how do you do it? The logistics of it all, keeping a spreadsheet for the budget, everything about it. I know that sounds so weird, but kind of like you just said that you love Slack and the thread and all that. I had that same obsession with Excel spreadsheets for budgets, figuring out the invitations, at that time, electronic wasn't very popular, so it was all paper. But understanding the flow, how would people come in? What would they do? What's the agenda like? Who are the speakers? All of that engaged me, got me excited. And that is the part that I was like, you know what? I know what I like. I will figure this out. Yeah, I may not have the formal experience, but I'm going to figure it out. And that was probably me being pretty damn stubborn, not realizing again how badly I could have failed. Because I didn't even think, like I said, the worst case was I would go back to tech.
Right. Stubborn, persistent. And it's worked out.
Yes.
And it's still working out.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really great advice. So you just mentioned all of the details that go into event planning.
Yeah.
I want to give you a minute.
Yeah.
Shameless shill. Tell us all about your book.
Oh, so, this was actually written because many people had come to me and were asking about the same questions. Like, how did you get started? How did you pivot when you didn't know the industry? And so I wrote the book to answer all those questions. So now when people come to me, I usually encourage them to read the book first, then schedule the time with me, because I'd be more than happy to answer anything that the book did not answer. Because majority of that book was written because I literally got probably the same 7 questions all the time. And I basically built out the book based on that. Now, what's interesting, of course, is now that we've had the pandemic, we're in the process of writing a second book of just what I've learned, because definitely had a different hat on and a different perspective, and just knowing what I know now, what I would have definitely done differently. So that's what the book is about. But the best compliment I got, honestly, was from a mom of a friend, also past client, read the book, and she now buys it as a graduation gift for any of her college kids' friends. So like, if they are graduating from college and they don't know what they want to do, she buys them the book to read it. She goes, you need to read this book, because this is not just about starting an event planning business. This is actually about figuring out what you want to do with your life. And I was like, wow. I was like, thank you.
That sounds like another book.
Yeah.
But you've got a second book in the
Yeah, well, we'll see how, again, my focus this year has been so busy on the business that I don't know if I've had enough time, but I'm definitely, if I say it now, that means someone's going to keep me honest, and do her, and that maybe by 12 months from now, I'll have it done.
Fantastic. So we'll look forward to the second book next year.
Yeah.
And then we'll look forward to your third book.
Oh, gosh.
About helping folks understand what they want to do in life.
Yeah.
Right? Big picture.
Yeah, big picture.
You've got a lot of wisdom to share. That's so great. Thank you for telling us about that. Now, on top of all of this, right? Busy lady running a very successful business, writing books on books. And in your intro, you started off by sharing that you're a mother of 2. Or maybe even 3 if you count your adorable Frenchie.
Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yeah, my kids would definitely have said, yeah, Mom, you love that Frenchie more than you love us.
So cute.
Thank you.
Caught him on Instagram.
Oh, thank you.
Gosh, how do you do it? How do you balance all the demands?
So one is I do have a lot of help. So when they were younger, now mind you, they're teens, so now one can drive, so that one obviously helps out the other one. But when they were younger, I had a team, and I know that is a privilege, because that is not for everyone. And also you have to know your family lifestyle. So first I like to always share is that my husband's also a CEO. Now at the time, he actually paused his career a little bit so that I could do Red Velvet. So he actually went back and got a full-time job so that we were both what we called not currently unemployed, like self-unemployed, because he was like, one of us needs to get a paycheck if the other one is not. So he went and got a steady job. And during that time, we had a full-time nanny that basically came and helped so that I could go back to work as quickly as I could. And then we went to the au pair route. That was for a few years. And then we had a live-out nanny. So for the early years, I basically had full-time help. Like when we were switching between nannies, I had a weekend and a weekday nanny. And the reason why that needed was because my husband pretty much traveled Monday through Thursday, and sometimes even over the weekends. So if I was busy doing my stuff, there was no one really to be able to watch the kid. Now, when they're younger, when they're babies and infants, the nice part is, like with Sophia, that's my daughter, who's now 17, I actually brought her along with me. So the nanny came with me on all the business trips, all the speaking engagements, everything. In fact, so much that I do find it funny that now she's kind of tied to events at her high school, because she probably was exposed to it that way, and she knew what she liked of it, what she doesn't like of events, because at an early age she already would see stuff and see the behind the scenes. So that's what happened. Now then, once she started going to school, it was a little trickier, because we then had school schedules that we have to abide by, but we really try to still lean in on taking them with us on business trips. So my kids, again, I know it's very privileged that they have, I think my daughter's on her 4th passport, because I think for kids it expires every 5 years. So at an early age, she went with us anytime we went on business trips. So she got exposure to all that. And part of that is that's the way our lifestyle was. And it is, actually. It only paused during the pandemic. And so I tell people we don't live a traditional lifestyle, but it works for me and my husband. But we do have very open communication. So for example, everything has to go on the calendar. The kids, my husband, everyone knows that if it's not on my calendar, it's not in my head. Bottom line. So if you want a play date or if you want to go to this dance and you're expecting me to drive you, it needs to be on my calendar, because if it's not on my calendar, someone else has to drive you, and it better say who it is, because that's how organized we had to be as a two working household. And so I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm also not saying it's traditional. And so the other thing I also share is that, like, we ate out 5 out of the 7 meals. And I was okay with this. My husband, thank goodness, was okay with it. But a lot of people are not okay with that. Like my mom, in fact, she would be like, y'all don't eat at home enough. Like, these kids don't even understand what a family. So in fact, during the pandemic, that was our first time really to eat more than 5 meals at home. And the kids were like, wow, this is different. Now, mind you, we did do curbside every day. Because I was, again, still working. And I was like, I just don't have the time to meal plan. And so that's the things that we've settled on and agreed with. And that's where I will say you need to find a partner that's willing to meet you halfway. I am very grateful that my husband does understand what I want to do, and I understand what he wants to do. So we do meet each other halfway.
Wow.
But it's not. Yeah, but it is not. I mean, we're not. That's why I don't want to call ourselves super, because we have a team. We have people that have helped us, and we have a big set of friends that have helped us too. Like, they know how crazy it is, so they usually will text us and go, Holland that's my son, our son, and they're like, he's been invited to this. Does he need a ride? And so they know they can't rely on us necessarily to be the carpool person. So
you take your family with you. Mm-hmm. What an interesting experience for your kids to be able to see what it's like to run a business. Yes,
it has been. But there are some downsides too, because it has been so stressful for them during the pandemic that both of them have now decided they do not want to run their own businesses. They saw firsthand what we had to deal with, and they said that's just too much. They both said, "Is there any reason why we wouldn't just go work for someone?" I go, "Oh no! You need to find what's your passion. I want you to find your passion. Don't follow my passion unless it is that is your passion.
That's curious. Yeah. That's where you started too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Working in your business.
So hey, I don't think they'll listen to this podcast, but I think that's especially my daughter. I think she thinks that's what she doesn't want to do, but I've seen enough of her that I know that she's going to probably be an entrepreneur. She's just been that way even as a kid. But right now, I think the stress of seeing how we had to run our businesses through the pandemic made her not want to go through that.
Sure. Yeah, I got to choose your stress.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Pick and choose. Although it seems like with a team, right? You can make it all happen.
And again, goes back to that too, because you have a team at home and you have a team at work.
Yeah. So maybe last question.
Yeah.
I am in a similar boat. I have 2 kids, right? And I couldn't imagine my life any other way. In a lot of ways, my girls help me prioritize what's important and where I want to spend my time. And in a lot of ways, I think have actually helped me be more successful. Because I'm more specific with my time. I am hearing from a lot more women, it feels like, this idea of delaying motherhood. Right? There's a lot of different tactics there, but thinking I've got to focus on my career first before I can even consider having children. What would you say to those?
So first, it makes me sad that we even have to think like that. Okay, so because I'm telling you, no man is thinking like that. So that's the narrative I do want to change, because and the one other thing I should mention earlier too. So my husband does some public speaking as well, and we always compare notes at the end. And to this day, he has never been asked, "How do you manage your work-life balance?" And pretty much every public speaking, I would say 9 out of 10 times I speak, that always gets asked. And I know that there's a reason why we get asked that, because obviously we're the ones that have to bear the children. I mean, until men can carry the babies, it's just a natural. I get it. And second, there is a persona that moms have to do certain things. And that is the hard part, where I was like, I would like to see us, especially as we head into the 2021st century, like, can we change that narrative just a little bit? To me, and this is actually something from I remember Gay Gaddis actually shared it at one of her talks. I would advise any female that is wanting to have a career to not ever just completely leave it. I'm not saying that doesn't mean you can't be a mom. okay? I'm just saying don't ever completely leave it, your career, and then come back, because that gap really can hurt you in the corporate world. And so the fact that if you have to make a decision between having kids versus having a career, I call bullshit, because of the fact that, again, what that means is we need to either figure out how to make childcare more affordable, or we need to figure out how to find partners that really will meet us halfway. Because like I said, my husband decided to go, because he was owning his own business at the time, but it wasn't like as doing as well as the current one. And so he went and found a job so that I could do this for at least a year and a half. And then I got pregnant. And he was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I have a job, because now I was like, yeah, because again, he did not let his ego get in his way. And he was like, we need to be a team. Now, if my business had not taken off, he would have obviously given me some points of like, hey, we need to figure out what this timeline is, because I know he wanted to go back and do his own thing. That was always in the plan. We just didn't know what was going to happen with Red Velvet. And like I said, when I first started it, I thought I was just doing it to get the job. I didn't think I was doing it to build a company. That changed obviously after year one. So that's the thing that I think we need to change that narrative. And to me, I would encourage women to figure out how you can have both without sacrificing that you feel like you have to sacrifice your career. I would talk to your partner. I really would, because it is possible to have both. I'm not going to say it's easy, because it was a lot of sleepless nights. And I mean, you're going through it.
It's going to be sleepless anyway. What's the difference?
Yeah. So, and there are a lot of, again, if you're working your way up a ladder in a corporate company, I will say a lot of corporate companies right now are being very reasonable. And because they're even offering paternal leave. It's not just maternity leave, it's paternity leave too. So yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you can have both.
You can have both. I'm not saying it's easy, but you can.
Lean in, do the hard work.
Yes.
You're going to be working hard anyways.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And again, but you have to know yourself, because I know there are some of my friends, there's no way that is their career, being the stay-at-home mom, which I applaud them, because I tried it for one day. Now, I know that sounds silly, but it was true. I tried it for one day to see if I would like it, and I realized I needed to be around adults more than kids. I love my kids, I do, but I needed that energy from adults. I didn't get the same energy I got from the kids when I was 100% just kids focused.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah.
Meaningful connection with adults.
Yes.
It's important.
Yes.
So important. What great advice. Thank you very much for sharing. And thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah.
It's been awesome to sit down with you, Cindy. Tell us, where can we find you? What's the best place to follow you?
Best way right now is definitely LinkedIn. So you can find me. It's either, and I think you're going to link it on the podcast 100%. Link. So that's easy. You can also find me on Instagram. My personal is Cindy Wears Red. And then for the business, it's Red Velvet Events. And we're active on both of those. But those are the easiest ways.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yep. We'll have all the links, and definitely follow Cindy. She's got a lot of wisdom to share. Thanks again, Cindy.
Thank you.